Well, thank you everyone for coming to this reflection this afternoon, and also to those who are joining online. I was hoping, with this being my last reflection, not to have an overall theme as such, but to reflect on a few things that really stood out to me during this time at Mancroft. Do you know, I had the chance last Monday to go with a couple of friends to visit the churches in the Yare Valley benefice, where I'll be from September. All three are relatively rural. Bradeston, one of the churches, is literally in the middle of a field. It probably has more cows than sheep near the church. And there have been some cows enter the churchyard recently, not, as far as I'm aware, a problem that repeatedly plagues Mancroft. They are, for the most part, quite small buildings, and really I think all of them showed signs of the pandemic. One of them was closed, and the other two had mask-wearing signs and track and trace forms for the visitors to fill in. It gave me a chance to reflect not only on the nature of this year, but how this year at Mancroft in doing ministry under lockdown has changed me, has led me to people here, to places in the city and situations, few of which I had imagined when I was first offered the chance to come. When I first visited St Peter Mancroft in March last year, I was unknowingly at that point attending my last church service before the first lockdown. We were in what I would call elbow bumping stage, do you remember that? And we weren't quite then as self-aware of space and mask wearing as we've since become. And I found myself among a pretty lively, enthusiastic congregation. Mancroft, I thought, had quite a relaxed atmosphere. It didn't have the type of starchy aura that a lot of other churches do. It didn't, by this point, have a YouTube channel, something which I'm sure Michael and those of us who've done live streaming this year can hardly imagine us coping without. But I felt a strong sense of calling that actually it was where God was telling me to be during the course of this year, to serve on the ministry team. And so when I started last September, it was obvious to me that this year was going to be just a bit different from the type of year that I had in mind. I know we've all been used to seeing family members and meeting up with friends from afar, but of course for most of this year that hasn't been possible. And so it has been a challenging year, especially for someone like me who's quite extroverted and really loves being around people. But there have been many blessings, particularly in the work which I've been able to do, especially with the online activities I've taken part in. I can remember in March 2020, in my former job, when my boss suggested that we might consider getting this new thing called Zoom. But he said, we'll get it just for a month because COVID might be over by then. Of course, this is amusing to reflect back on, but I don't think any of us imagined how much we would come to use video technology this year. But with every hardship comes a new opportunity. And it's through running things on Zoom that I quickly came to realize that there were people able to access and join in with events who otherwise wouldn't have been able to, precisely because we were using this technology. Though having said that, it doesn't mean that things have all been plain sailing. I can remember one fine Sunday morning, I sat down in the live stream chair when the service was about to begin, when I realized that the camera system had decided to fail on me. Not my finest moment here as I scrambled behind the scenes to try and get the machine to start. But technology hasn't quite changed all the ministry activities involved here. And one thing I'm particularly grateful for having been involved with Fiona this year on is in doing food bank deliveries with her around Norwich. I've been genuinely moved by some of the people I've met there, particularly listening to their stories and learning about the situations. It gave me just a sense of how hard-hitting the effects of the pandemic have been, as well as where governmental systems have been far less than sufficient in terms of helping those who really need it. but also in how, in part, it was informed by my own experiences of how lonely a lot of people have felt. There have been, in some cases, a lot of people and organizations very willing to help, but sometimes just someone there, listening to them, taking the time to show care and love can be the biggest blessing they can receive. It even led on one occasion to the car battery going flat and me getting a rather impromptu side-of-the-road exercise to get it started again, but that's probably a story for another day. Closer to home, in the church building here, it's been interesting to explore most of Mancroft, from the top of the tower to the crypt below. It's been really quite interesting to meet some of the daytime community that attends here, and to see the role that the church building plays during the time I've served on the welcome team. Aside from the standard questions which every welcome team member gets, such as, is this a cathedral? And who was St Peter Mancroft? Few things can compare to the, I think, really awestruck stances that people make when before the medieval stained glass depicting scenes of God, and standing in a church building that has had God-loving and worshipping Christians stretching back over 500 years. And there have been all sorts of really great opportunities which I've learned over the last year, really far too many to list, but one example I'll give is I was over in St Stephen's on a placement there, and a couple of Wednesdays ago, I was asked to help out in a toddlers group, which runs on a Wednesday morning. And I have to admit, I was quite nervous. I'd never done anything like that before. And so I did what you do when you're quite unsure, which is I tried to follow the lead of the organisers to see what they were going to do and try and copy their lead. But I learned very on, almost instantly, that there isn't really a method, if you like. You just go in and play, you just sit down and enjoy the toddlers' company, picking things up, pretending to make some food, build a house, post letters in a letterbox. I was particularly touched when a young girl there came and presented me with what I thought was a cup of tea, but turned out to be a plastic mug with a purple cabbage inside it. I was very grateful. I thought this was a very kind gesture on her part, and what I really loved about that time was, above everything else, to see just the raw, unfiltered enthusiasm I felt there. You know, everything was just something to be grabbed on, looked at, rattled and listened to, and in some cases chewed. But overall, reflecting on this time, I'll look back fondly, I think, on going with the child bishops to meet Bishop Graham and getting their photograph taken with Oliver donning the mitre I had built from scratch earlier that week, something of a test of my artisanal ability. I'll miss working on odd jobs around this church building, working with those in the worship teams here, especially with Chris, who's been such great fun. I think I'll miss all the people I've come to know and love within the wider Mancroft community on a Sunday and during the week. All the incredible, deep insights people have had in the online study group. All the amazing, talented people that work on various aspects of church life, often very much behind the scenes. And also with the, frankly, amazing and diverse ministry team that St Peter Mancroft is so blessed to have. And that is something I pray in earnest I may be able to look back fondly on in the years to come. And so let us end in prayer. God, I thank you for St Peter Mancroft, for all who play a part in its life, and all who are blessed by walking inside, or even just passing by in the street. May your hand be sovereign in all that this church is, and all that it seeks to do. May you grow good and godly disciples here, and be a strong witness to all those in the city with whom it comes into contact. I thank you for my very short time here during the stretch of its history. May you use that and all the people that have given out for me and all the things which I have done to work with them for the good of your kingdom. Amen.